All right, let's jump into the next meeting. It is a special council meeting here Monday, November 14th at 6:45 p.m. while immediately following the public hearing objections. So again, we're at the WC O'Neill Arena Complex, and this is being aired through Facebook on the Town of St. Air's page and Zoom. And if anyone has any questions on anything pertaining to this agenda, you can email pnopper@townofstanders.ca. I'll do the recording of attendance. All members of council are in attendance with the exception of Councillor Blanchard, but he is joining us virtually. So good to have you online, Councillor Blanchard. And also at this time, it's important to recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Besco Tomogati people. I'll be looking for a mover to approve the agenda as circulated. Do we have a mover? We got Councillor Neal, seconder Councillor Heenan, beat you by an inch. Any discussion on the agenda? There is just one item, but we will be going into closed session as well at the end. But I just wanted to make sure there's nothing else. Okay, all in favor of approving this agenda, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Seeing none, that's been carried. Any disclosure of conflict of interest regarding the Wharf? No, okay, didn't think so. No presentations, although when we get into the introduction, consideration passing of bylaws, the discussion probably will require a little bit of a staff lead in for us just to get some commentary around. There is a report included, but it'll be good to get just a little more context before we discuss it. So at this point, it is a discussion on Market Square and the Market Wharf project, which is PW 221113. So at this particular time, there's a background staff report. I'll pass it over to our CAO, Mr. Chris Spear, just to provide a brief summary for council on that, because there's been some updates since the last time we discussed.
Thank you, Worship. And the report was presented, but I'll, at least for those that may either attendance here tonight or listening online, we'll give a quick synopsis. So as you're aware, back in 2021, we were given a grant from the federal government for the update of the Wharf. At the time, the total estimated project cost was $5 million, of which the town was to come up with 1.3 million and 3.7 million from other levels of government. But it should be noted that the original application was made in 2019 and that they just it was initially rejected, and then the new stream came in, they pulled it out and offered us the funding for it, which we accepted and hope to go through. But it's important to note that that was for the infill option that had been presented, which essentially was armor stone that would go out to the length of the wharf. Because of the pandemic, supply issues and fuel issues, the cost of it now has escalated to the following: that with the rock infill option is 6.1 million. The timber crib, which is similar to what we have now, same technology, built to 7.5 million. The concrete crib is 7.9. The steel piling, which was actually what council had preferred, was 8.2 million. And then as we discussed about a month ago, I think we could just repair what we have for 5.3 million, but we had concerns that 5.3 million only give us 10 to 12 years of life because it's still based around a structure that is 50 plus years old. And so we're severely short of funding. That the 1.3 was a stretch, but now typically under these projects, we agree in advance that any overages are to be borne by the town, which if you expect 5 to 10%, you might be able to live with it, but not when it's 25 and 30%. And this has been a problem right across the country. And unfortunately, they don't have a mechanism in place to easily say, well, we'll dump another $100 million into it and everybody gets an extra 25% or something. It just doesn't exist. So we had a discussion. This program is being administered by the Regional Development Corporation out of Fredericton, even though it's funded mostly by the federal government. They're administering on their behalf. And so what they said is there's really three options that we have. One of them is that we can pay the over or go through the project as is with the overages, and the RDC can contribute 50% more. But the problem is they have a limit of only $500,000 on that. And we're talking millions. So it's really out of our capacity to do that. And as I showed there, that if we went for one of the higher end options, our debt payments could go up to a couple $100,000 a year, which is significant. Another option is we can amend the scope of the work. And so we can figure out what we can afford, pull it back and do the work, and they'll support that. Well, would likely support it. I can't tell you 100% because you got to go back and ask for an amendment to the scope. But they said they'd be likely in favor of that, but they have to go through everything. And from our perspective, if we went that, the two things we'd look at would be redoing Market Square, like we've discussed. So raising that armstone wall to protect it, which is about probably about $400,000. Now it was originally quoted at 350. And that's a bit of a guess from me. And then also to wrap the steel piles at the end of the wharf. Those, as you know, were replaced in the 90s. They're starting to deteriorate a bit. And if we put that on, that would add like another 50 years of life. And that's something that wouldn't interfere with the operations of the wharf users. It'd be done at low tide and you know, underneath that they wouldn't have to, shouldn't have to shut down the wharf. And so I guessed at 2.5 to 3 million, I'd have to relook at that, but that's roughly based on the quotes we had before for those two portions of work. And then what we'd do if that was the case is then we'd say we're not going to do the approach, which at the end of the day was really what we wanted to do in this whole project, but is the most expensive part. And we'd reapply for it immediately, I guess, but that could take a couple of years before we get an answer on that. But that's where we'd sit with it. Or we could just abandon the whole funding altogether, say it's gotten out of control. We're going to put in a new application, kind of similar to number 2, except we won't do anything and then put everything in place. One thing, staff are still a little concerned, not concerned, but would want to inspect the safety of the current trestle. It's still a wooden structure. We've had it inspected about 2 years ago, and just to ensure the safety of it, especially for heavier loads. You know, for walking, no problem. And we've been eliminating some of the heavier trucks that we've been putting on it, including large trucks, boom trucks, even the coaches, you know, the larger buses, but we still do allow fuel trucks and school buses or 20 seaters can still go out on it. But we got to make sure for the safety of the public and of course be able to use that wharf in the meantime that we do an inspection over the winter and see where we're going with it. And so I guess time is running out on us as far as the project was supposed to be completed by early 2025. And if we're going to do it, we got to make a decision soon so we can go into design and let our partners know. Otherwise, staff, you know, if we're going to abandon part of it, then we have to know that too. And staff can get another application in. One of the things I guess we're all aware of now too is once the wharf is being worked on, there could be a struggle in making sure it isn't under construction during the summer season. It looks like they need 9 months to a year. And I guess we always have to assume the worst case scenario. And one of their options, I thought was very expensive, was to build a secondary wharf beside the current wharf, then eliminate the trestle. So it would look a little bit funny. You'd go out and then turn left and go out again. It's practical. It would keep the summer in, and then the hope would be in the future, but it, you know, it'd be another phase that you would actually widen the approach of the wharf so that it's, you know, a lot wider and so that it would be more symmetrical than what it would be, what we're proposing. So staff are just looking at direction that we've got to let our funding partners know, and we've got to know how much planning or lack of planning we need to do for council to get this moving forward. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. That does summarize nicely. I guess the only thing is in your conclusion report, it does indicate that we know we've got additional funding to raise Market Square. Unless we do the front of it, there's really no point of doing the back, just because you're not really protecting it. Market Square itself does need work done to it though, correct? Like, yeah,
if I'll remind you, at Easter 2 years ago, the same storm that ruined the trestle at Katie's Cove, it put that underwater for a few hours. And so we're seeing that already. And, you know, every couple of 3 years that water is breaking over the top of that, and it could lead to damage to some of the private infrastructure there. And so it highly recommend that we do that. And there's also undermining going on there, especially under the wooden walkway. So we'd like to replace that soon. And then if we get the whole square done, then it would last another 200 years, to be honest.
Perfect. Does any counselor have some thoughts? Otherwise, I do have some myself, but first I'll give you an opportunity. Anyone have anything that they think about what you've heard in this report? I could quickly throw mine then. Whenever you've got funding from other levels of government of $3.7 million, it's really hard to say no. But with that being said, the total cost of this to do it right is up significant, especially if you get into the concrete or the steel, which is what concrete's what they originally looked at. We're basically the 3.7 we're getting from the other levels of government. Well, the project went up probably about 3 million in cost, so we're really not any further ahead. So my reaction to this as I read the report and thought about it is I actually think that we should do the work at Market Square, like that's in number 2. And then I think we should go and apply and say that we only spent half the money because it's literally 2.5 to 3 million, but we didn't spend it all because we didn't have enough to do the whole project. Let's reapply, but let's go for the best case. Let's go for the widening. And they may say you're not getting that much. You're only getting 75%, but then you go back and say, okay, well, it's 75%. Maybe we can't do the widening, but we do have enough to maybe do the concrete at that point or something. I'd like to use some of the money that we've got guaranteed. And I would like to say that if they approved it once, they must see merit in the project. And I think they would actually understand, because this is happening all over the country, that prices have gone up so high. We're not the only ones that are having trouble finding a way to fund projects that were approved 2 years ago. So that's my initial reaction. And then if we get the basically Market Square done up, we can also raise it, which is a separate grant, and not turn our back on that money. And again, there's a bit of a gamble, but I do like the thought of not closing down whale watching for a complete summer in the town of St. Andrews as well. So I think we should go for it. And then the other thing that I think Councillor Gubishal has been a big component of this is if we did widen it, it might be an opportunity to put little huts and shops on the old part and really be an economic driver to expand our historic downtown district without taking away from the look and feel of our community. So that's my quick reaction with my runny nose. So I don't know if anyone else has anything they'd like to add or comment. If they agree, disagree, by all means, the floor is yours. Councillor Hurnold and Councillor Heenan.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I guess that sounds like a best case scenario if that's on the table. I know that this has been a long conversation that's been going on for, how many years at this point? 5, 2, well, going back. Yeah. So I haven't really been in front of it. So my only, wish would be, what's the public's sense of this? I know we get kind of bogged down before in discussions over design, but is there a sense that the public knows that this is a current safety issue, and if so, what's their take on it? I know that there's been multiple times in the past to go back to public consultation on this, but what's your sense of it?
Well, everyone wants to be safe, and they don't want to lose the wharf. So the design was probably the biggest hurdle. That's why it's taken so long, that we got approval. We're ready to kind of go into it. But then, the council decided maybe the armor stone that was going to widen, and it was significantly wider by the time you made it, and then kind of pyramided it out, is about 3 times the width of our current wharf. And the people, the feedback we got from the community was that it wasn't acceptable. It took away from back to the heritage look of the wharf and what it is. The users were concerned enough about the safety that initially they used to all get fueled up by the Irving or whomever trucks that came down, and most of them now have worked out their own system that they're bringing fuel down in smaller barrels to remove that weight. So everyone is trying to do their part as best they can. There's still a couple of, the fishermen have some heavy loads, and we ask them if there's certain times of the year that if they have to, they should go load off another wharf if it's too big. But mostly they're running stuff on trailers and pickup trucks, so it's limited to how much weight they can put on that anyway. But it would, if we lost the wharf, which we did maybe 7 or 8 years ago, where they came in, the engineers, and we had to do an emergency couple of sections to reinforce them, and we lost it for only 8 or 10 weeks. But that can be a problem because, they still rely on pickup trucks going back and forth. Now that we have the biological station working out of there, they have equipment stuff. They have to be able to get back and forth on there for sure. But that reinforcement can be done without closing the wharf. And if we do an inspection immediately, between now and the end of January, and see there's a problem, we could have the work done before the season opens up in May. We've had experience with that already.
Just one follow-up question too. Are we at the point where we have to worry or protect the town from liability?
That's why we're doing the inspection. It's the only way to protect us that way.
Question on the repairs, if we do get that inspection report and it does deem that work's required, we're not using all of our external funding. Is there an opportunity to use some of those resources to shore it up in the meantime? Or is that something that'd be 100% town paid if we did it quickly?
I'd assume we could use it, your worship. It's,
Sure.
but
What they're
we'd
doing.
have, you don't want to put money that you're going to tear it apart.
No, it's not ideal.
In a year.
It's
So
not
we'd
ideal.
we'd
but-
have to just do enough work, work to shore it up for like a couple of seasons.
And there's no guarantee that we're gonna get it in a couple of years, so we
Yeah.
kind of are forced, even though.
Yeah.
To kind of do it, and if we are shoring up that area. If we do the other extension on it, it actually might not necessarily be all bad sped, because it might be less weight on that particular area, so. Counselor Heenan, over to you, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I had written down 3 notes. First would be the inspection. I would like to see, if I have my shopping list, I'd like to see a total revamp of Market Square, because that's very important. And if we do that and we do it right, then we don't have to go back to it. And then, as we just suggested, if the inspection shows some damage, there may be some funds that could be available, like to, like put steel around the pylons that are bad, or whatever it might be, because as we know, it'll be another 5 years probably before we ever get any more money, and everything put through with the government going to change or stay the same or whatever it does, because we got to get it done before something like that happens. But my opinion is Market Square is a priority. And then, as I said, if we have some damages, et cetera, if we can use any of the funding, that would be my preference. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Counselor Heenan. Any other member of council? Otherwise, Counselor or Deputy Mayor Acton, sorry.
I agree.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will say if the engineer and the staff determine that there's significant work required to the wharf, I think we circle back at that point. I think you would anyway. Counselor Gubishal, Counselor Neal, any comment if you feel good about what's being discussed? Counselor Gubishal.
You've thought it through pretty well, Your Worship. I recall in the past, I was quite in favor of the rock infill, just because I thought that that raising the wharf by 1/2 a meter wasn't going to be sufficient when everyone else is raising theirs by 1 meter. So if we're going to raise it, we might as well do it by 1 meter at the same time. But costs have gone up and things have changed. I'm a big fan of pictures. I would have liked to have seen some drawings with these, just from the engineers. But you know, we got to do everything we can to keep the wharf going, and certainly, as you outlined it earlier, it seems like that's the most has the best rationale. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Neal, anything to add?
I don't know if I have anything to add, but again, just my personal opinion, again, I think I would be in favor of staff's second recommendation there. I think shoring up the front of Market Square should be our priority right now. There's definitely a safety issue there with the undercutting that's going on underneath that wooden walkway, as well as some of the buildings there. So again, with the money that we have, if we do have that opportunity to do that phase 1, I would be in favor of that right now. And then potentially, as the mayor mentioned, revisiting the funding for the trestle.
Perfect. Thank you, Counselor Neal. And I know Counselor Blanchard's camera's off, but just in case anything he wanted to add, I'll give him a quick call out.
Yeah, no, I just listening. I'm supportive of what's been proposed here so far in terms of doing what we can with the with some of the funds, the initial funds, and then reapplying and seeing if we can get additional money later on to do the rest of the work.
Thank you very much, Counselor Blanchard. I think we have consensus that everyone was all in agreement there. So is there anything else under the discussion on Market Square, Market Wharf, or does that wrap that up for you?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I think we're good. We may have to bring a motion to amend the request, but I'll touch base with the funding partners this week to let them know it's coming.
That was probably quicker than you thought it would be, wasn't it?
We're not complaining.
All right. Nothing under new business. Question period. Any questions? You drove a long way down, Rhythm, so. Any questions on anything? What about online? Nothing came in, eh? Dominic, yeah, no, you're good as well. Thanks for being here. Okay, so is there any council or deputy mayor's comments this evening? I'm seeing none. I myself have no comments. So at 7:06 PM, I'm looking for a mover to go into closed session per the Local Governance Act, Section 68(1)J, which is a labor employment matter, including the negotiation of a collective agreement. Could I have a mover, please? I've got Councillor Hurdle, won that one. Deputy Mayor Akaji, because I should raise quickly. All in favor of going to closed session? And Councillor Blanchard's in as well. We'll give a moment to shut everything down. Thank you for everyone for attending. So please. A motion to come out of closed session. Get Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Heaton. All in favor of coming out of closed? Okay, motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Akaji, seconded by Councillor Kubish. I'll have to leave them. Sorry, guys. Don't leave them. All in favor of adjourning? We're adjourned.